Brian Book Club podcast Korean.
여러분은 인문고전을 어떻게 읽으시나요? 그냥 눈으로만 텍스트를 쭉 따라가는 독서가 아니라 한 편의 연극처럼 텍스트와 대화하는 방법이 있다면 어떨까요?
아, 그거 정말 흥미로운 접근이네요. 사실 우리가 보통 책을 읽는다고 하면 되게 수동적인 행위를 떠올리잖아요.
맞아요. 그래서 오늘 우리가 아주 깊게 파헤쳐볼 자료가 하나 있습니다. 브라이언북클럽이라는 곳에서 진행된 아주 독특한 인문고전 퍼포먼스, 그 북텔링 영상이에요.
네, 영상에서 다루고 있는 책이 바로 프랜시스 호지슨 버넷의 명작, 비밀의 화원이죠.
네네, 맞습니다. 오늘 이 지적인 교감을 이끌어가는 두 명의 주인공을 먼저 좀 소개해야 할 것 같아요. 텍스트를 해체하고 자기 목소리를 내는 북텔러 역할은 놀랍게도 중학교 2학년인 모니카 안 학생이 맡고 있습니다.
중학교 2학년이요? 와, 그거 정말 기대가 되는데요.
그쵸? 그리고 그 맞은편에서 이야기를 경청하고 질문을 던져주는 리스너이자 주제자 역할이 바로 브라이언입니다.
이 두 사람의 나이나 세대 차이를 염두에 두고 오늘의 논의를 따라오시면 훨씬 더 흥미로우실 겁니다. 10대 소녀와 성인이 어떻게 이 북텔링이라는 치밀한 시스템 안에서 교감하는지 볼 수 있거든요.
좋아요. 이 내용을 한번 본격적으로 풀어볼까요? 영상에서 이 퍼포먼스는 크게 리허설과 메인 북텔링이라는 두 개의 거대한 구조로 이루어져 있더라고요.
맞습니다. 이 구조가 그냥 단순한 영어 읽기를 아주 심도 있는 인문학적 탐구로 확 바꿔놓는 핵심 장치거든요.
그래서 첫 번째로 살펴볼 게 이 텍스트에 뼈대를 세우는 리허설 과정입니다. 저는 처음에 그냥 바로 소리내서 읽는 줄 알았어요.
보통은 그렇게들 하죠. 하지만 본격적인 무대인 메인 북텔링에 오르기 전에는 텍스트를 완전히 자기 것으로 소화하는 해체 작업이 반드시 필요합니다.
네, 그 리허설 단계가 무려 3조각으로 나뉘어 있더라고요. 6화 원칙 브리핑, 그리고 6화 원칙 디스커션, 마지막으로 섹션 프리뷰까지요.
겉보기엔 약간 기계적인 분석틀 같죠. 하지만 자료 속 구체적 사례를 보면 전혀 그렇지 않습니다. 모니카 안 학생이 56쪽 지문을 분석하는 걸 한번 볼까요?
아, 거기서 모니카가 되게 핵심적인 이유를 하나 꼽잖아요. 그 영어 지문에서 아무도 못 들어가게 해 라는 뜻의 문장이요.
네, 맞습니다. He won't let no one go inside 라는 문장이죠. 모니카는 크레이븐 슈가 문을 잠근 이유로 첫째 슬픔에 빠진다, 둘째 그리워한다, 이렇게 두 가지를 제시합니다.
와, 14살 중학생이 물리적으로 문을 잠궜다는 팩트 뒤에 숨은 상실감이라는 감정을 짚어낸 거잖아요. 저는 이게 무슨 영화 촬영 전에 배우와 감독이 치열하게 대본 리딩을 하는 것 같더라고요.
정확한 비유네요. 그리고 여기서 리스너인 브라이언이 그 감정을 받아서 가족이나 연인, 애완동물과의 이별에 빗대어 깊이 공감하는 장면이 나옵니다.
청취자 여러분도 어떤 문장 하나에 이렇게 훅 하고 감정적으로 입해본 적 있으신가요? 이게 그냥 중학생의 영어 공부라고 보기엔 너무 깊이가 있어요.
여기서 정말 흥미로운 점은 전문가 입장에서 볼 때 모니카가 논의를 뒷받침하기 위해 선택한 키 센텐스입니다.
어떤 문장이었죠?
바로 Why asked Mary in spite of herself? 라는 문장이에요. 한국어로는 왜 메리도 자신도 모르게 물었다 라는 뜻이죠.
그냥 왜? 라고 물어본 거 아닌가요? 그게 왜 키 센텐스가 되는 거죠?
단순한 내용 파악을 넘어서 등장인물의 내적 동기와 호기심이 시작되는 시발점을 파악했기 때문이에요. 인문학적 분석의 완전 기초를 보여주는 거죠.
아하, 그러니까 10년 동안 멈춰있던 비밀의 화원의 시계가 그 왜라는 본능적인 질문 하나로 다시 굴러가기 시작했다는 거군요.
네, 맞습니다. 텍스트를 완전히 씹어 삼킨 셈이죠. 그럼 이제 텍스트의 의미를 완벽히 이해했으니 그것을 어떻게 표현할 것인가의 문제로 넘어가야 합니다.
드디어 메인 북텔링의 시작이네요. 메인 북텔링은 총 6조각으로 구성되어 있는데 저는 그중에서 첫 번째와 두 번째 단계인 한국어 연상독백과 영어 연상독백 규칙을 보고 좀 충격을 받았어요.
어떤 부분에서 그렇게 놀라셨나요?
아니, 책을 손에 쥐지 않고 바닥에 45도 사선으로 내려놓더라고요. 그리고 정면을 바라보면서 마치 연극 배우처럼 차분히 독백을 하는데 이게 진짜 보통 일이 아니잖아요.
그렇죠. 게다가 시선의 배분 규칙도 아주 엄격합니다. 앞을 보고 읽는 시간이 9, 그리고 단어를 엿보듯이 밑에 글자를 스캔하는 시간이 1이 되어야 해요.
그러니까 무려 9대 1의 황금 비율이네요. 고개를 휙휙 돌리면 안 되고 책과 대화하듯이 천천히 자연스럽게 움직여야 하는 건데 왜 이렇게까지 구체적인 물리적 제약을 두는 걸까요?
책을 들고 읽으면 뇌가 활자를 단순한 시각 정보로 처리해서 읽어버리거든요. 하지만 이렇게 거리를 두고 정면을 응시하면 상황이 달라집니다.
단순히 활자를 읽어내려가는 게 아니라 막 내 머릿속에 이미지를 꺼내서 보여주는 느낌이 들지 않을까요?
바로 그겁니다. 모니카가 읊은 대사를 직접 인용해보면 그 느낌이 확 와닿으실 거예요. 한국어로 먼저 읽죠. 마사는 잠시 망설이는 듯하다 덧붙였다. 뜰 하나는 잠겨 있어요. 10년 동안 들어간 사람이 한 명도 없고요.
와, 그 호흡을 그대로 이어서 바로 영어로 전환하잖아요. She seemed to hesitate a second before she added, One of the gardens is locked up.
네, 이게 인문학적으로 엄청난 의미를 가집니다. 책 속의 지식을 뇌에 그냥 저장하는 데 그치지 않고 그걸 자신의 목소리와 감정으로 완전하게 체화하는 거죠. 인터널리제이션이 일어나는 겁니다.
체화. 정말 멋진 표현이네요. 타인에게 전달하는 퍼포먼스로서의 가치가 여기서 빛을 발하는 것 같습니다.
맞습니다. 이렇게 혼자만의 독백을 마친 후에는 이제 타인인 리스너 브라이언과 텍스트에 대해 논리적으로 묻고 답하는 단계로 이동하게 되죠.
그게 바로 북텔링의 3단계와 4단계인 육하 원칙에 의한 영어 스토리텔링과 영어 질문과 대답 시간이군요. 두 사람이 영어로 막 대화를 주고받는데 엄청 생생했어요.
네, 이 단계에서는 세계관이 확 확장됩니다. 배경은 메리와 마사가 있는 침실이고 밖은 꽃 한 송이 없이 춥고 앙상한 겨울이죠.
네, 그 분위기 속에서 아주 핵심적인 스토리가 나오잖아요. 크레이븐 부인이 10년 전 갑작스럽게 세상을 떠났고 영어로는 Mrs. Craven died 라고 했죠.
네, 그리고 그 슬픔을 견디지 못한 크레이븐 씨가 화원의 문을 잠가버리고 열쇠를 땅에 묻어버렸습니다. Buried the key in the ground라고 묘사되죠.
그렇다면 이 모든 게 대체 무슨 의미일까요? 저는 이 문답 과정에서 주제자인 브라이언과 모니카가 하녀 마사의 의도에 주목한 게 너무 신기했어요.
어떤 의도였나요?
마사는 왜 굳이 이 슬픈 비밀을 낯선 꼬마 메리에게 이야기했을까 하는 점이에요. 모니카는 그 이유가 방 안에만 박혀있는 메리의 호기심을 자극해서 밖으로 끌어내기 위함이라고 대답하더라고요.
영어로는 to let her outside from the house라고 아주 명확하게 짚어냈죠.
네, 스토리텔링이 가진 어떤 설득의 힘 혹은 사람을 움직이는 힘을 모니카가 이미 이해하고 있는 것 같았어요.
여기에 심리학적, 인문학적 맥락을 조금 더 더해보면 어떨까요? 크레이븐 씨의 행동을 한번 생각해 보세요. 상실의 고통 때문에 아예 기억의 문을 잠그고 열쇠를 묻어버렸잖아요.
그냥 방치한 게 아니라 완전히 봉인해버린 거네요.
맞습니다. 이건 인간의 아주 강력한 심리적 방어 기제입니다. 청취자 여러분도 각자의 삶 속에 이렇게 고통스러워서 아예 자물쇠를 채워버린 무언가가 있지 않으신가요?
저도 그 대목에서 제 스스로를 좀 돌아보게 되더라고요. 이렇게 객관적인 텍스트 분석에서 시작했는데 어느새 저의 현실 문제로 확 넘어왔어요.
이게 바로 인문고전 독서의 힘이죠. 이제 이 100년 전의 이야기가 현재 나에게 어떤 의미인지 묻는 가장 깊은 사유의 단계, 즉 북텔링 5단계와 6단계로 들어갑니다.
네, 드디어 존귀한 질문과 최고의 영어 단어 시간이네요. 지문 안에서 딱 3단어만 사용해서 질문을 만드는 게 존귀한 질문, 즉 리버럴 퀘스천이고요. 단 하나의 단어를 고르는 게 베스트 잉글리시 보케블러리죠.
맞습니다. 모니카 한 학생이 여기서 최고의 단어로 어떤 걸 선택했는지 혹시 기억나시나요?
기억나죠? hesitate라는 단어였어요. 확신이 안 서서 망설이다, 주저하다라는 뜻이잖아요.
네, 한여 마사가 10년 된 비밀을 입 밖으로 꺼내기 직전에 주저했던 그 찰나의 긴장감을 정확히 포착한 겁니다.
그리고 그 긴장감이 모니카가 던진 3단어의 존귀한 질문으로 바로 이어지더라고요. One of the gardens is locked up? 뜰 하나는 잠겨 있나요? 라는 질문이요.
그렇죠. 텍스트에 이미 잠겨 있다고 나와 있는데 모니카는 왜 굳이 이 질문을 브라이언에게 던졌을까요?
그러니까요. 근데 브라이언의 대답을 듣고 저는 진짜 머리를 한 대 맞은 것 같았어요. 브라이언은 자기 전 30분에서 40분 동안 상상하며 잠드는 시간, 즉 루시드 드림에 대해 고백하거든요.
자각몽을 꾸면서 장난도 치고 두려움도 느끼는 자신만의 비밀스러운 내면의 뜰을 14살 소녀 앞에서 아주 솔직하게 털어놓은 거죠.
맞아요. 어른이 아이에게 자기 무의식의 세계를 고백하는 것도 놀라운데 저는 모니카의 대답에서 진짜 뭉클했어요.
모니카 학생이 뭐라고 대답했었죠?
자기는 학교나 사회에서 항상 긴장하고 뭔가 예의 바르게 행동해야 한다는 압박 때문에 진짜 속마음을 털어놓지 못했다는 거예요.
아, 10대 소녀가 느끼는 사회적 페르소나와 내면적 억압에 대한 고백이군요. 그게 모니카에게는 잠긴 뜰이었던 거네요.
네, 맞아요. 그런데 모니카가 이 브라이언 북클럽이라는 환경 덕분에 어른인 브라이언과 이렇게 대화하면서 마침내 자기 비밀의 뜰 열쇠를 찾았다고 하더라고요. 상상과 고민을 나눌 수 있게 되었다고요.
와, 중학교 2학년 학생이 고전 문학을 통해 자신의 내면적 억압을 직시하고 성장이라는 통찰까지 이끌어낸 거네요. 정말 대단합니다.
청취자 여러분에게도 묻고 싶어요. 여러분에게는 이렇게 안전하게 내 진짜 마음을 열고 보여줄 수 있는 비밀의 화원 같은 공간이나 사람이 있으신가요?
이것을 더 큰 그림과 연결해 보자면 결국 이게 인문고전 독서의 궁극적인 목적이 아닐까 싶습니다. 단순히 활자를 읽고 정보를 섭취하는 게 아니라는 거죠.
맞아요. 그 텍스트 안에 있는 등장인물들의 관계, 여행 가서 서로 싸우고 헤어지기도 하지만 다시 티격태격하며 마음을 여는 그런 과정들을 매개로 삼는 거잖아요.
네, 그런 매개를 통해서 세대 간의 장벽을 허무는 겁니다. 브라이언과 모니카가 보여준 것처럼 진실한 교감을 나누는 것, 그게 바로 북텔링의 본질입니다.
진짜 요즘처럼 정보가 넘쳐나는 시대에는 우리가 텍스트를 그냥 쭉쭉 스캐닝하듯 소비하고 치워버리잖아요.
슈퍼미나 요약본에 익숙해진 현대인들에게 이 북텔링의 치밀한 리허설과 공감각적인 연상독백, 철학적인 존귀한 질문은 아주 훌륭한 인문학적 훈련이라고 볼 수 있습니다.
네. 시간을 들여서 텍스트와 이렇게 깊이 교감하는 게 얼마나 큰 삶의 해방감을 주는지 느낄 수 있었어요.
오늘 우리의 심층 탐구를 통해서 많은 분들이 그런 교감의 가치를 다시 한번 상기하셨으면 좋겠네요.
네, 좋습니다. 오늘 논의를 마치면서 청취자 여러분께 이 질문 하나를 꼭 던지고 싶습니다.
어떤 질문이죠?
만약 오늘 당장 무려 10년 동안 여러분의 무의식 속에 깊이 묻어두었던 그 잠긴 뜰의 열쇠를 우연히 발견하게 된다면
아, 그 녹슨 열쇠를 쥐게 된다면요?
네, 문을 열고 들어간 그곳에서 당신은 가장 먼저 어떤 시든 꽃 혹은 새로 피어나는 새싹을 마주하게 될까요? 그 화원을 다시 가꿀 용기가 당신에게 있습니까?
오늘 밤 각자의 마음속 화원 앞에서 한번 깊이 사유해보시는 시간이 되길 바랍니다.
네, 주저하지 말고 그 문을 열어보시길 응원합니다. 오늘의 깊은 탐구는 여기서 마치겠습니다. 함께 해주셔서 감사합니다.
Brian Book Club Podcast English.
So imagine holding a century-old novel, right? But you aren't actually allowed to read it normally.
Oh, yeah, that sounds completely counterintuitive.
Right. You have to place the book diagonally at this precise 45-degree angle, and you are only allowed to glance at the words maybe 10% of the time?
Just 10%?
Yeah, just 10%. The other 90% of the time, you must stare straight ahead. And you speak the text aloud, turning your head slowly, almost as if you're having a deep personal conversation with the book itself.
Which is fascinating. I mean, welcome to the really intense, almost extreme intellectual sport of book telling.
Exactly. I'm so glad we are jumping into this deep dive today, and welcome to everyone listening. Today, we are exploring a highly structured method of literary analysis. It's called the book-telling liberal arts classic performance.
And just to, decode that term really quickly for everyone, when they say liberal arts classic performance, they don't mean like putting on a theater play with costumes and props.
Right, no stage makeup here.
Makeup? They mean marrying the critical thinking of the liberal arts. So the philosophy, the psychology, that deep humanistic perspective with the physical act of speaking.
And this specific method was developed at the Brian Book Club. So our mission today is to really unpack exactly how this works, using an actual session transcript.
Yeah, and the sources we have are fantastic. We are looking at a transcript featuring a second-year middle school student. Her name is Monica Ahn.
And she is acting as the book teller in this scenario.
Right. She's the one actually performing the text. And she's guided by Brian, who acts as both the listener and the presider for the session. And together they are, they're dissecting an excerpt from Frances Hodgson Burnett's classic, The Secret Garden.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because this is, frankly, light years away from the standard middle school book report, where you stand at the front of the class and just mumble a plot summary.
Oh, totally. This is meticulously structured into two distinct halves.
No.
You have the rehearsal, and then you have the main book telling.
So let's start with the rehearsal, because you can't just jump into the performance, right?
Right. The underlying philosophy here is that a piece of literature is, well, it's only as powerful as our ability to map it onto the human experience. So before anyone attempts to perform a text, they have to understand the core mechanics of what is happening beneath the words. And that cognitive mapping, that happens in the rehearsal phase.
And that phase is broken down into 3 really specific parts, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. First is the 5W1H briefing. So that's your who, what, when, where, why, and how. Then you move into the 5W1H discussion. And finally, the section preview.
And we actually get to see Monica navigate this in real time in the transcript. During that rehearsal, Brian asks her to select a reason phrase from the excerpt.
Basically asking her to find the emotional core of the scene.
Exactly. And she chooses this seemingly simple line spoken by the maid, Martha. The line is, "He won't let no one go inside."
Which, you know, on the surface is just a piece of exposition. It's just a statement of a physical boundary. But the brilliance of that 5W1H discussion is that Brian doesn't just accept the sentence and move on. He pushes her to explain the human motivation behind it.
And this is where it gets impressive. Monica, who again is a second-year middle schooler, she derives 2 profound humanistic insights from that simple boundary.
Yeah, she explains that the reason Mr. Craven won't let anyone inside the garden is because of 1, falling into sadness, and 2, missing someone.
She takes a literal physical lock on a door and immediately diagnoses the psychological lock on the character's heart.
It's a huge leap in empathy. And then she has to identify the key sentence, the thing that acts as the narrative software driving the whole scene.
Right. She zeroes in on the protagonist, Mary. And she picks the, quote, "Why asked Mary in spite of herself."
Oh, I love that choice.
It's so good, right? Monica identifies this undeniable, almost gravitational pull of curiosity. You know, when a child is suddenly faced with a door that has been locked for 10 years.
Yeah, you can't not ask why. And once those emotional anchors are set, they move to the section preview. This is basically the bridge between pure analysis and the actual performance.
So what does she do in the preview?
Monica delivers this emotionally resonant preview of the dialogue. She actually adopts the specific dialect and tone of Martha, the maid. She's really testing the waters of the character's persona.
It kind of reminds me of a musician calibrating their instrument before a concert. You know, you aren't making music yet during the rehearsal. You are just tightening the strings so that when you finally do strike them, they resonate at the exact right emotional frequency.
That is a perfect analogy, actually.
But I do have to wonder, maybe you can shed some light on this. Breaking down a beautifully written text into these stark data points, like assigning a literal reason and a key sentence, doesn't that risk making the final performance feel robotic? Like, if you overanalyze the math of a scene, do you kill the magic?
That's a really valid question. But what's fascinating here is that the constraint actually creates the freedom.
How so?
Well, if you don't establish the why firmly beforehand, a performer is usually just guessing at the emotion in real time. But by understanding that Mr. Craven is locking the garden strictly because of his overwhelming, unbearable grief over his wife's sudden death, the text becomes anchored.
Ah, I see.
Right. The bookteller maps the emotional terrain first. The sadness, the longing, the curiosity. They map it before they walk it. So when they finally speak, they aren't trying to figure out how to say the words. They are simply feeling the established emotion, and that emotion naturally produces the words.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So Monica has mapped out this heavy emotional terrain. She understands the grief and the curiosity intellectually, but knowing a character is sad is entirely different from physically embodying that sadness in a room.
Totally.
So how does she cross that bridge?
That requires shifting into the main booktelling, specifically the centerpiece of the whole thing, which is known as the imaginary soliloquy.
And they do this twice.
Yes. It is performed first in Korean and then structured identically using the English text excerpt. And this is where those rigorous physical and mental rules we mentioned earlier really come into play.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting, because the physical rules sound maddeningly difficult to me. Let's dive deeper into that. The bookteller places the book diagonally at a 45-degree angle.
Right.
That creates a very specific spatial relationship. You aren't burying your face in the pages.
Exactly. The book is treated as a separate entity, a conversation partner. And then you have that gaze rule we talked about, the strict 9-to-1 ratio.
Think about the last time you had to give a presentation at work or school. If you're anything like me, your instinct is to stare at your notes the entire time, terrified of forgetting a detail.
Oh, absolutely. The safety blanket.
Yeah. But this method forces you to do the exact opposite. You spend 9 parts of your time looking forward, actively reciting the text, and only one part of your time glancing down to scan the words.
And the specific instruction from the method is crucial here. You don't snap your head back and forth frantically. You scan the words as if peering at them, and then you turn your head slowly and naturally to deliver them straight ahead.
It sounds almost meditative.
It is. It is explicitly designed to be a calm, reflective utterance. It's a monologue based on free association, completely removing the safety net of just reading off a page.
And Monica executes this flawlessly in the transcript. She delivers these direct quotes with incredible poise. She recites, Martha seemed to hesitate a second before she added, and then she drops in that key sentence she calibrated earlier, why ask Mary in spite of herself? But I really have to push back on this 9-to-1 ratio. Placing that severe of a gaze constraint on anyone, let alone a middle schooler, seems almost punitive.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like forcing a pianist to play a complex concerto while only allowing them to glance at the sheet music once per page. Is this just an arbitrary difficulty spike to make the method seem rigorous?
I get why it looks that way, but the physical constraint isn't a punishment. It is actually the ultimate focus tool. It forces total internalization.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. If you can only look at the book 10% of the time, your brain simply cannot rely on visual reading to get through the performance. You have to actually ingest the concepts. By turning the act of reading into a physical monologue, the text ceases to be just ink on a page.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the 45-degree angle and the deliberate head movement prevent that panic of losing your place. It forces the bookteller to adopt the words as their own lived memory.
That makes perfect sense. The physical imitation prevents you from just coasting on autopilot.
Exactly.
So once the text is physically spoken and embodied through this imaginary soliloquy, the performance demands that the bookteller actually prove the depth of their comprehension.
Right. You can't just memorize the sounds of the words and look confident. You have to prove you understand the architecture of the world you just built.
And this brings us to the English storytelling and the question and answer segments.
Yes, and we return to that 5W1H structure here. But instead of analyzing single sentences, Brian, acting as the presider, uses it to interrogate the situational context of the entire excerpt.
Yeah, Brian starts firing questions to construct the reality of the scene. They establish the characters. So you have Martha, the maid, and Mary, the isolated little girl. They establish the setting, noting they are inside Mary's bedroom. And Brian asks about the world outside that window. Monica paints this bleak, freezing picture. It's winter. The trees outside look cold with small branches. You immediately feel the claustrophobia of this house.
You really do. And from that physical setting, they drill down into the historical tragedy at the center of the story. Through these targeted questions, Monica explains that the garden has been locked for 10 years because Mr. Craven's wife died suddenly.
Right.
And he buried the key in the ground because even a glimpse of the garden triggers too much agony for him. He is literally trying to bury his grief in the dirt.
But the truly brilliant part of this Q&A is when they uncover the humanistic motive driving the dialogue. Brian asks why Martha is telling Mary this incredibly sad, secretive story in the first place.
Right, because think about it. Why gossip to a lonely child about a tragic death?
Exactly. And Monica deduces that Martha is actually being, quote, very smart. She realizes that Martha is weaponizing curiosity. She wants to make the isolated Mary intrigued enough to finally leave the confines of her bedroom and step outside.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the exact mechanism of the humanistic perspective in action. Literature is a mirror for human behavior. So through these targeted questions, the bookteller is actively learning empathy. They are learning to look past what people say to understand why they say it.
It's like Martha is using a sort of Victorian clickbait.
Yes, that's exactly it.
She is dangling this tantalizing mystery of a locked door, acting like she shouldn't talk about it, all just to manipulate Mary into taking her first step toward healing.
It's brilliant.
But how does this specific Q&A format push a student from just rattling off objective facts like, okay, the garden is locked too, diagnosing that level of complex human psychology?
It achieves that by relentlessly challenging assumptions. When Brian asks how the garden has been locked or why Mr. Craven buried the key, Monica is forced to articulate the causal link between trauma and avoidance.
Right.
She has to explain the human condition. When she recognizes Martha's cleverness in teasing the secret, she is identifying the subtle, sometimes manipulative ways humans try to help each other heal. The Q&A segment forces the reader to treat these characters not as fictional constructs moving a plot forward, but as real psychological entities.
They basically become case studies in human resilience.
Exactly.
Which sets up a fascinating pivot. Because once Monica has diagnosed the grief and secrets of these fictional characters, the book-telling method takes that mirror of empathy and turns it directly onto the participants in the room.
Oh, this is my favorite part. That happens in the liberal questions segment. It is arguably the most profound part of the entire performance.
The rules for this part are crazy.
They are. The rule here is that the bookteller must prepare a deeply personal, open-ended question to ask the listener, but there is a massive catch. The question can only be constructed using 3 words derived directly from the text excerpt.
Which is such a brilliant surgical constraint. I want you to think about why that works. By forcing a student to pick just 3 words, you strip away their ability to hide behind complex, convoluted sentences.
Right.
It forces this raw, immediate word association that completely bypasses all their conscious filters. Monica looks at this 100-year-old novel and crafts an incredibly evocative question. She uses her 3 words to ask, is one of the gardens locked?
It's so poetic. And the method demands that both participants answer the question with total honesty.
And Brian goes first, right?
Yeah, Brian, as the listener, goes first. He reveals that his own personal locked garden is that 30 to 40-minute window right before he falls asleep. He explains that he uses this highly guarded, private time for vivid imagination and lucid dreaming. He even mentions that he sometimes plays tricks in his dreams, testing the boundaries of reality until he wakes up. It is a very safe, protected space for his mind to wander away from the world.
That is such a fascinating look into how adults protect their mental space. But Monica's answer, it's almost jarring to hear a middle schooler articulate her internal life with such clarity.
It really is.
She gives this remarkably vulnerable answer. She confesses that in her daily life, at school and with her friends, she always acts polite and follows the rules.
Yeah.
She projects this perfect image. But underneath, she hides her true feelings. She admits she is constantly tense, constantly guarding herself.
Which, honestly, she's describing the universal experience of building a social mask. We all do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But then she contrasts that anxiety with her experience sitting right there in the Brian Book Club. She says that in this specific environment, with this method, she can share her worries and her imagination without fear of judgment. And she finishes her answer by stating that because of this space, she has, quote, found the key to her secret garden.
Wow. And Brian validates this beautifully. He notes that through their shared journey in the club, and he even brings up a specific trip they took to London where they actually bickered and argued a bit, he says she truly opened up her heart.
The polite mask dropped.
Exactly. The tension she was carrying melted away because she was allowed to be a real, complex human being.
It is such a profound realization, and it perfectly illustrates the goal of the book-telling method. This entire rigorous structure isn't ultimately about Frances Hodgson Burnett or Martha or a locked door in Yorkshire.
Right?
It is about giving the reader the vocabulary, the framework, and the psychological safety to unlock their own internal gardens.
So what does this all mean? We spend so much time worrying about whether kids are hitting reading comprehension metrics. But listening to this transcript, it makes you wonder how much emotional weight kids and adults really are carrying around every day, completely unnoticed, until a method like this gives them a release valve.
Yeah, the literal buried key in the book seamlessly became a metaphorical key for Monica's own emotional liberation.
The text provides the coordinates, but the reader has to do the digging.
Beautifully said. And that excavation brings us to the final moments of the performance, the outro, which features a segment called The Best English Vocabulary.
In this closing segment, the bookteller prepares one single word from the text section that they deem the most important vocabulary word, and Monica chooses the word hesitate.
She defines it as pausing before saying or doing something because you are nervous or not sure, and the simple sentence she provides to demonstrate it is, Kay hesitated for a moment and then said yes.
It is almost cinematic how perfectly that word ties her entire journey together.
Right.
Monica, much like Martha in the story Navigating a House Full of Secrets, spent her daily life hesitating. She was nervous. She was hiding her true feelings behind that polite mask.
Yeah.
But through the rigorous process of the rehearsal, the vulnerability of the imaginary soliloquy, and the honesty of the liberal question, she found the courage to stop hesitating. She found the courage to say yes to her own feelings, to speak up, and to find her key.
And this raises an important question about our own daily habits. The defining lesson for Monica's performance is that reading and communication in general requires active participation.
Absolutely.
When we engage with a book or a person with the focused intensity of that 45-degree angle rule, when we truly treat them as conversation partners, they give us the words we didn't know we needed to describe our own lives.
And that brings us right back to you listening to this right now. We all navigate a world full of surface-level interactions and polite masks. What is your personal locked garden? What are the thoughts, the dreams, or the anxieties you keep buried beneath a perfectly fine exterior? Are you actively hiding them? Or are you just waiting for the right conversation, the right book, or the right person to help you dig up the key? Take a moment today to reflect on what you might be keeping locked away behind a 10-year-old door. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the art of book telling. Keep analyzing the text of your own life, keep asking why, and as always, stay curious.